I never thought I'd be sitting here, telling a bunch of strangers about this. But here I am. Maybe because it feels like the kind of thing you can't tell your friends without them siding you for a while, or maybe because it's been years now and I'm finally ready to talk about what happened. So, here goes. It all started so damn perfect. At least, it felt perfect at the time. Natalie and I were married for 12 years. We had everything. A nice house, both working good jobs, the kids, Chloe was 6, Tom was 4, so young, so full of life, and we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. I'd always been the kind of guy who was a little too trusting. I didn't question things too much. Things just worked. Or at least, they did until they didn't. It was one of those moments when everything changed that I should have seen it coming. One afternoon, out of nowhere, I found a weird message on Natalie's phone. It wasn't like an affair message, nothing obvious, but it made me feel uneasy. Like a gut punch I couldn't ignore anymore. I was at work, so I called her. She picked up right away, but I could hear it in her voice. She sounded off. She kept telling me everything was fine, just the usual work stress. But I could tell. You ever get that feeling? Like, you know when someone's lying but they keep talking in circles hoping you won't notice? That was her. A few days later, I came home early. Just wanted to surprise her, you know? It was late afternoon, the kids were out back playing, and I walked into the kitchen to find her on the phone with someone. She hung up real quick when she saw me, but not quick enough. I caught a couple of words, I don't love him anymore, and I'm not sure what I want. And that was it. I didn't need to hear the rest. I confronted her right then. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? I wasn't about to let her dance around the truth. She was shocked when I asked who she was talking to, and that's when I knew. The look in her eyes was the dead giveaway. I didn't even need to hear her answer. I just stood there, watching her squirm, and I felt my chest tighten. She tried to deny it, of course. Lied through her teeth. Said it was nothing. Said she was stressed about work. But I could see it. The tension. The lies. The cracks. And in that moment, I knew my life was about to change forever. I didn't say anything right away. I had to swallow it all down. But when she went out that night, I went through her stuff. Yeah, maybe it wasn't the healthiest move, but I was done pretending. I found enough messages to know I wasn't just paranoid. There was someone else. And not just someone, more like several someones. And so it began. The first of many betrayals. That's what hit hardest, the fact that I had trusted her. I'd let myself believe things were good while she was running around behind my back. The days after I found out were like living in a fog. I didn't know what to do, how to act, or even what I wanted. But one thing I was sure of was that I couldn't stay married to someone who was treating me like this. The shock and hurt were too much to just gloss over. I confronted her again the next day. She tried to act like it wasn't a big deal, like it was all just a phase or some miscommunication. She even had the audacity to get defensive, telling me I was overreacting. Overreacting. She'd been sleeping with other people behind my back, and I was the one overreacting. I think that's when I really started to lose respect for her. Not just for the cheating, but for the way she handled it. She didn't even seem sorry. There was no genuine remorse, just a lot of excuses. I was lonely, she said. You were busy with work, and I needed someone. I wanted to scream at her. How could she do that to our family? To me? But I kept it together. The kids were home, and I didn't want them to see us fighting. We decided to go to therapy after that, but it didn't help. Natalie went a few times, but it was clear she wasn't in it to fix things. She was just there because she had to be, because she knew I wasn't going to stick around if she didn't make some effort. Then came the first of many broken promises. She swore she'd stop seeing him, the guy she was seeing at the time. And for a little while, I believed her. But that didn't last long. I started noticing things again. Late nights. Weird phone calls. More lies. And by then, it was too much to handle. A few months later, she moved out. Said she needed space. I remember feeling a weird mix of relief and anger. Relief because I didn't have to watch her slowly tear our family apart anymore, but angry that she was making all these decisions without even thinking about the kids. Tom was too young to understand, but Chloe? She was 6, old enough to see things weren't right. She asked me where Mommy was, why she wasn't coming home. I didn't have a good answer for her. That's when I knew I had to step up. It wasn't just about me anymore. I had to protect them. And that's exactly what I did. When Natalie left, I had no idea how I was going to handle everything. I'd always been the quiet guy who avoided drama. But suddenly, I was thrown into this situation where I had to be both mom and dad. I had to step up for Chloe and Tom, and I wasn't going to let her screw up their lives any more than she already had. The first few months after she moved out were hard. I wasn't just managing work, keeping the house running, and getting the kids to school. I was also trying to make sense of this mess she left behind. She wasn't even around to help, not really. She'd send a text here and there, maybe show up for a visit once in a while. But that was it. I had to fight for custody, and that was a whole other battle. She wanted to stay involved in the kids' lives, but I knew deep down she wasn't really trying to be a mom. She was just trying to keep some hold over me. She'd show up at court with her tearful speeches, telling the judge how much she loved them and how she wanted to be a part of their lives. It all sounded so fake. And then came the letters. She started sending me these long, emotional letters, sometimes a few a week. She'd talk about how sorry she was, how much she missed the family, how she wanted us back. There were even a couple where she said she'd changed. She kept begging for a second chance, but I wasn't stupid. She hadn't changed. She was just desperate. Desperate to find someone, anyone, who could make her feel whole again. I tried to keep my cool, but it was hard. The kids were doing well without her, better than I thought they would, honestly. Chloe was thriving in school, and Tom. Well, Tom was Tom. Still the little goofball who made everyone laugh. They didn't miss her. And that hit me in ways I didn't expect. It was like they'd adapted faster than I had. And that was when I realized, I wasn't just protecting them from her, I was protecting them from the hurt she would keep bringing into their lives. They deserved better than whatever chaos she had left behind. And so, I focused on them. I made sure they knew they were loved, they were safe, and they didn't have to worry about their mom's mess. I think they knew, even at their age, that things weren't right with her. But they trusted me. They trusted that I was going to give them the life they deserved. It wasn't easy. There were nights I stayed up late, wondering if I was doing the right thing. But I knew one thing for sure, there was no going back. Things settled into a new normal for a while. Natalie didn't really show up much after the divorce. I thought maybe she was starting to accept it, that maybe she'd get herself together. But that didn't last long. It was around Chloe's 8th birthday when Natalie suddenly reappeared. Out of the blue. No warning, no heads up. I was at work, and I get a call from Chloe saying, "Mom's here, Dad. She wants to see me." I froze. I couldn't believe it. I immediately told Chloe to stay with Tom in the living room and that I'd be home soon. I left work early, my stomach turning as I drove home. When I walked in, there she was, standing in the doorway, looking, well, different. Not better, not worse, but like she hadn't even tried to take care of herself. Her hair was a mess, her eyes bloodshot, like she hadn't been sleeping. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to feel sorry for her, but I didn't. Not after everything. She tried to give me this sad smile when I walked in, like it was all going to be okay. But I wasn't buying it. "Liam," she said, voice shaky. "I need to talk. Can we talk? Please." I could tell she was trying to hold it together, but it was obvious that things weren't right with her. I told her to sit down, but I wasn't about to make this easy for her. "You left us, Natalie. You walked away, and now you want back in? After everything?" Her face twisted, like she wasn't expecting me to be so direct. "I know I messed up," she said, her voice breaking. "But I've been through so much, Liam. I've lost everything. My career, my friends. I lost myself." She started crying, and I won't lie, part of me wanted to comfort her. But I knew better. She didn't want help. She wanted to make herself feel better, to get back in control, like she could just pick up where she left off. "I'm sorry, but this isn't about you anymore," I said. "You've hurt the kids enough. You've hurt me enough. And they don't need this chaos in their lives. Not again." Her face crumbled. "But I'm their mother, Liam. They need me." "No," I said, my voice steady, despite the anger bubbling up. "They need consistency. They need stability. And I've given them that. What are you offering them? More lies? More broken promises?" She was silent for a moment, just staring at me. I could tell she was trying to figure out what to say next. But nothing came out. I could see it now. This wasn't about her being a mom. It was about her trying to patch together whatever part of her life she could salvage. She wanted to feel whole again, and she thought she could do that by getting back into the kids' lives. But I wasn't going to let her do that. Not at their expense. Not after everything she'd done. So, I told her what she didn't want to hear. You need to get your life together. And when you do, maybe we can talk. But not right now. Not while you're still this mess. Her lips quivered, and for a second, I thought she might try to argue again. But she didn't. She just nodded, wiped her face, and left. I watched her walk out, and the whole time, I felt like I was watching someone who was too far gone to be saved. I knew I couldn't save her. I had to protect my kids, and that meant keeping her away from them for now. The rest of the day, Chloe barely mentioned it. She was too busy with her birthday, too busy being a kid. Tom was just happy to eat cake. But I could tell that moment had affected me more than it had affected them. And I hated myself for feeling sorry for her for even a second. A few weeks passed after that confrontation, and I thought we'd gotten back to normal. But I should have known better. Because Natalie wasn't done with me, or with the kids yet. She started showing up more frequently, this time not at the house, but sending letters again. These ones were different though. They weren't just apologetic, they were manipulative. She started telling me how much she needed to be in the kids' lives, how they were better off with their mother, and how they would forgive me if I just let her try again. She even made some weird threats about legal action, like she was going to try to take me to court for custody again. I wasn't going to let that happen. I knew she was just trying to regain control, to get back something she had lost. She wasn't thinking about the kids. She wasn't thinking about what was best for them. She was thinking about herself. And that's when I realized how deep into her own selfishness she had sunk. One evening, out of nowhere, she called. This time, her voice was different, more desperate, like she was on the edge of something. She asked if we could meet, said she had something important to discuss. I knew better than to believe it was anything genuine, but I agreed to meet her, just so I could shut it down face to face. When I saw her, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her face was pale, her hair a mess again. She looked like a shell of the woman I had once known, and it hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't angry right away. I was just sad. I was sad for her, but even more for my kids, who had been subjected to her unstable moods, her lies, her inconsistency. Liam, she said, her voice breaking, I'm so sorry. I've lost everything. I can't keep doing this. I can't live like this anymore. I didn't say anything at first. I just waited. I can't go on like this, Liam. I've hit rock bottom. But I need you. I need you to help me. I'm trying to get better. I'm seeing someone, I'm in therapy. But I need you to believe in me again. I need you to let me see the kids. They need to know I'm here, that I'm still their mom. Her words came out in a rushed, pleading mess. It was the same story, just a different version. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for a second chance to do things on her terms. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the woman I had once loved, the woman who had so much potential, who had so much promise. But that person was gone. And the person standing in front of me was someone I didn't recognize. No, I said quietly, my voice steady but firm. You don't get to come back in and out of their lives whenever it suits you. You've already hurt them. You've hurt me. You're not going to do this again. Her face crumpled, like she was expecting me to say something different. But I meant every word. You need help, Natalie. But I can't be the one to fix you. And the kids, Chloe and Tom, they don't need you to fix them. They need stability. They need a mother who isn't a mess. And right now, you're not that. She stood there, her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel anything for her at that moment. It was like all the anger I had carried for so long finally drained out of me. I wasn't mad anymore. I was just done. Please, she whispered. Please don't take them away from me. But I had already made up my mind. I'm not taking them from you. You did that. You walked away, and now it's my job to protect them. I left her standing there on that street corner, and I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because I knew if I did, I might cave in. I might let her back in for the sake of old times, for the sake of who she used to be. But that woman was gone, and the person she had become was a stranger. And my job wasn't to save her. My job was to save my kids. After that, Things went quiet for a while. I thought I'd finally made it clear to Natalie that there was no way back. But I should have known better. The calm before the storm is always the trickiest part. She started showing up at the kids' school events, unannounced. Just showing up with this look on her face like she belonged there. Chloe would see her, all excited at first, and then look at me like she didn't know how to feel. I'd watch her struggle with it, torn between wanting her mom there and knowing something wasn't right. Tom was too young to care, but Chloe wasn't. I'd approach Natalie after those events, and she'd give me this pathetic, apologetic look, telling me how much she wanted to be a part of their lives again. But every time, she was just as unstable as before. One day, she'd promise she was getting her act together, and the next, I'd get a call saying she'd checked herself into some rehab center. I tried to be civil, tried to let her have some space, but I wasn't about to let her drag the kids into her mess. I got a letter from her one day, saying she'd hired a lawyer. She was filing for joint custody again. At that point, I knew I had to take a stand. I couldn't let her drag the kids through another court battle. But I also wasn't going to fight her if she wasn't ready to change. I kept my focus on the kids, on making sure they had a solid foundation, that they felt safe and loved. Chloe started talking to me more about how confused she was about her mom. She asked questions like, why does mommy keep leaving? Or is she ever going to be normal again? I didn't have good answers for her, just that we would be okay, that I was going to be here for her and Tom, no matter what. And through all of that, I realized something. I didn't feel sorry for Natalie anymore. I couldn't. She had made her choices. Now, it was just about making sure my kids didn't have to pay the price for them. But the fact that she kept coming around, kept trying to get back into their lives, told me something else too. She wasn't just losing herself. She was losing the people who used to care about her. And honestly, it felt like she was losing the last bit of her humanity. I wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. Tired of being the strong one, tired of watching her spiral, tired of watching my kids watch her break promises. But I wasn't going to let them feel that same emptiness. So I kept going. Just one step at a time, keeping things steady for Chloe and Tom. It wasn't long after that when things started to unravel even more for Natalie. She tried a few more desperate attempts to get back in touch, each more frantic than the last. One day, out of nowhere, she showed up at the house. It was a Saturday morning. The kids were in the backyard, playing, and I was making pancakes. I didn't hear her car pull up. But then, Chloe came running inside, her face pale. "Mom's here," she said, her voice trembling. I wasn't sure how to respond. I'd already told her not to come by without warning. But this time, I didn't even have to confront Natalie. She was already standing in the doorway, knocking. I took a deep breath and opened the door. She was dressed like she'd been sleeping in her clothes. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't been taking care of herself. "Liam, please," she said. Her voice was cracking, desperate. "I need to talk to you. I'm really trying, okay? I'm trying to get better. I'm seeing someone, I'm doing everything I can, but I can't do it alone. Please." I stood there, speechless for a moment. This wasn't a "we can work this out" conversation. This wasn't an apology. This was a cry for help. But it wasn't a cry for help for us. It was for her. "Where's the stability for the kids, Natalie?" I said quietly, stepping aside so she wouldn't come in. "Where's the consistency? Where's the mother they need?" She looked at me like I'd just slapped her. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not perfect. I'm trying. I can't just be who you want me to be overnight." "You can't be who I want you to be," I said, swallowing hard. "But you sure as hell can be who they need you to be. They need a mother who is stable, who's healthy. Not someone who disappears when it's convenient and shows up like it's all going to be okay." She shook her head, almost like she couldn't hear me anymore. Her lip quivered, and she took a step back, but she didn't leave. She stood there, staring at me like she was trying to make me feel bad for being the one to hold the line. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I can't keep doing this with you." For a second, I thought she might break down again, but she didn't. She just stood there, her face blank, like all the fight had gone out of her. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt empty. I hated seeing her like that, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't keep carrying her baggage. I had to protect the kids. And that was all that mattered now. I went back inside, but the weight of the conversation lingered. Chloe didn't ask about it. She just went back to playing with Tom, like it hadn't happened. They had already learned how to shield themselves from her drama. It was me I was worried about now. Could I keep holding up this wall for them? Was I doing enough to protect them from the mess their mother kept trying to drag them into? I went out to the backyard, sat with the kids, and watched them play. They were so carefree, so full of life. For a moment, I let myself feel like maybe, just maybe, I was doing something right. I thought things had finally calmed down. Natalie's attempts to force her way back into our lives had slowed down, and for a while, it felt like she might actually give us the space we needed. But that peace didn't last long. One afternoon, I was picking Chloe and Tom up from school when my phone started buzzing. It was Natalie. I ignored it at first, but then came the text messages, long rambling ones about how she was truly ready to change and deserved a chance to prove herself. She claimed she had something important to discuss, something that couldn't wait. I was already irritated, but when I got home, there was a letter in the mail too. It was another one of her emotional, manipulative letters. This time, it was filled with vague threats about how she'd take things to court if I didn't let her see the kids. She accused me of alienating her and ruining her relationship with them. That night, I sat at the kitchen table after the kids were in bed, rereading the letter and trying to figure out how to handle this. Every sentence screamed desperation, but also a complete lack of accountability. Natalie wasn't trying to repair anything. She was trying to bully her way back into our lives. A few days later, she showed up again, this time at the kids' soccer game. She stood on the sidelines, waving at them like nothing had ever happened. Tom didn't notice much, but Chloe saw her and immediately ran to me, asking why her mom was there. I didn't have a good answer. I just told her to stay focused on the game. After the match, Natalie tried to approach Chloe, but I stepped in. "This isn't the time or place, Natalie," I said firmly. "You need to leave." She gave me a look, part defiant and part desperate. "I'm their mother, Liam. You can't just keep me away forever." "This isn't about keeping you away," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's about protecting them. You've done nothing to prove you've changed, and until you do, this is how it's going to be." She stormed off, muttering something under her breath. I didn't care. My priority was getting the kids home and keeping them from getting dragged into her chaos again. That night, as I tucked Chloe in, she asked, "Why doesn't Mommy want to stay with us?" I paused, trying to find the right words. "Mommy's going through some things right now," I said gently. "It's not your fault, okay? She loves you, but she's just not ready to be the mom you need." Chloe nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully understand. How could she? She was just a kid. But I wasn't going to let Natalie's instability mess with her head. I knew it was only a matter of time before Natalie tried something bigger. She always did. I should have known the calm wouldn't last. A week after the soccer game, I got a letter from Natalie's lawyer. I'm not gonna lie, my heart sank when I saw the envelope, thick, official looking. I already knew what it was about, but still, reading it hit me like a punch to the gut. She was filing for full custody. I couldn't believe it. After everything, after all the lies and the chaos she'd caused, now she was acting like she was the one wronged. The letter stated that she had changed, that she was in therapy, and that she was ready to be a mother again. She even accused me of alienating her from her children, and suggested that I was abusing my position as their father to keep her away. It was insane. But it also made me furious. I didn't waste any time. I called my lawyer right away and set up a meeting. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just a fight for custody. It was her last attempt to control me, to manipulate me back into her life. And it wasn't going to work. When we met with my lawyer, I was already done. The letter wasn't just a legal threat. It was the final confirmation I needed that Natalie was beyond saving. She wasn't interested in being a good mother. She just wanted to win, to prove she could still control things, to take back the power she'd lost. And I wasn't about to let that happen. We discussed our next steps, gathering evidence of her erratic behavior, showing that she hadn't actually changed, and making it clear to the court that it was in the best interests of the kids to stay with me. I didn't want to drag Chloe and Tom into court if I didn't have to, but I would fight for them with everything I had. I remember driving home that night, the weight of it all pressing down on me. My head was spinning. I kept thinking about how different my life was now. I was a single father, raising 2 kids, doing everything I could to make their lives stable, to protect them from the mess their mother had created. And now, I was going to have to fight her in court. Fight for their future, for their peace of mind. When I walked in the door, Chloe was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. She looked up and asked, "Dad, what's happening with Mommy?" I didn't want to tell her everything, but I also didn't want to lie. "Mommy's trying to get more time with you, Chloe. But we don't have to worry about that. You're safe here. I'm not going to let anything happen to you." She nodded, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. She didn't understand the legal stuff. But she knew that something wasn't right, that things were changing again. I had no idea how long this fight was going to last, but I wasn't backing down. I had already done everything to keep my family stable, to give Chloe and Tom a normal life. And I wasn't about to let her wreck it all just because she couldn't handle her own mess. Over the next few weeks, Natalie kept trying. She showed up at the house, sent more letters, even tried to send gifts for the kids. But nothing worked. Every time she came around, it was just another reminder of why I had to keep her away from them. Her instability, her inability to take responsibility, it was all too much. Then one afternoon, I got a call. It was from the hospital. I'd been expecting something like this, but I wasn't prepared for how it hit me. Natalie had been hospitalized. Again. This time, it wasn't just some vague excuse or emotional outburst. She was in the ER, completely out of it. Her therapist said she had been struggling with a mental breakdown, and it looked like she was headed for a full relapse. The doctors said it was the result of years of bad decisions catching up with her. And I couldn't help but feel a little numb. I went to the hospital, not sure what I was supposed to feel. I didn't want her to be sick or in pain, but I couldn't ignore the part of me that felt relief. Relief that I wasn't the one left to pick up the pieces anymore. That she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. When I saw her in the hospital bed, it was hard to recognize her. She looked like a stranger. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken in. She barely seemed aware of where she was. I stood there for a while, watching her, trying to figure out what to do. But there was nothing I could do for her. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. I wasn't going to take her back, and I wasn't going to let her drag my kids back into her chaos. But it didn't stop me from feeling bad. Bad for her, bad for everything she'd lost, but mostly bad for the kids, who would never have the mother they deserved. I left the hospital without saying a word to her. There was no point. When I got home, Chloe and Tom were playing together in the living room. They looked up when I came in, and I smiled, doing my best to seem like everything was okay. Because for them, it had to be. Natalie's life was spiraling out of control, but my kids were doing okay. And that's what mattered. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could finally breathe. This was my life now, my family, my responsibility. And I was going to make damn sure nothing and no one was going to take it away from me. Things weren't perfect. They probably never would be. But I was getting the stability I'd fought for, and for Chloe and Tom, it was enough. And that's all that mattered. The court date came fast. When Natalie filed for an emergency hearing, claiming she was better and ready to reconnect with the kids, I didn't flinch. Her actions over the last year had shown who she really was. I gathered all the proof, her erratic behavior, failed treatments, and all the broken promises. It wasn't hard to see through her. In court, I didn't hold back. I didn't need to. The judge could see she wasn't the mother she claimed to be. He ruled in my favor, full custody. Natalie got supervised visits, but that was it. No big celebrations. No relief. Just exhaustion. Walking out of that courtroom, I wasn't happy. I wasn't even relieved. I was just done. Done with the fight, done with trying to fix someone who couldn't fix themselves. I drove home, thinking about everything, about how much time had been wasted, how my kids would never have the mother they deserved. But at least they had me. And that was enough. When I walked through the door, Chloe and Tom were at the kitchen table, doing their homework. Chloe looked up and asked, "Did it go okay, Dad?" I nodded. "Yeah, it went fine." She smiled and came over to hug me. "Good. We're glad you're home." For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was home. Not just physically, but emotionally. I didn't need anyone else to make this real. I had my kids. They were mine. And that was enough. Natalie was out of the picture now. She'd made her choices, and I had made mine. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just done. We had dinner together, just like any other night. The way it was supposed to be. Things weren't perfect, but they were getting better. And that was all that mattered. Life after the court ruling settled into a new rhythm. The chaos that had once felt like a storm constantly threatening to tear apart everything I had built began to feel more like a distant memory. The kids were thriving. Chloe and Tom adjusted to the stability we'd created, and honestly, so did I. The weight that had hung over me for so long started to lift, even if just a little. Natalie tried reaching out a few times after that. Texts, emails, even an occasional voicemail, but I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I had already given her too many chances, and I wasn't about to let her disrupt the peace we'd finally found. It wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about protecting Chloe and Tom from a mother who couldn't stay consistent, who couldn't be trusted. I focused on work, on being the best dad I could be. Chloe and Tom filled my life with laughter and energy. I made sure to be there for every school event, every late-night homework session, every scraped knee. I became a regular at their parent-teacher conferences, at their sports games, and I even started volunteering at their school. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present. I could tell that Chloe still missed her mom, especially during moments when I saw her looking wistfully at other kids with their mothers. I did my best to comfort her, telling her that it was okay to miss someone, but that she was safe and loved. It wasn't easy, but Chloe was strong. She understood, even if she didn't always show it. Tom, on the other hand, was just happy with the way things were. He never knew the kind of instability that had been there before. Things at home were calm. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't worried about the next crisis. I wasn't living in constant fear that I'd get a call or a knock on the door that would turn everything upside down again. But that didn't mean I was done processing everything. It wasn't like one day I just woke up and felt healed. Some nights, I still found myself staring at the ceiling, wondering how things had gone so wrong. How had the woman I once loved turned into someone I could barely recognize? But then I'd hear Chloe and Tom laughing downstairs, or see them working together on a school project, and I'd remember what mattered. I didn't need answers. I had a family, my family. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was ours. One afternoon, a few months after the custody battle, Chloe and Tom were in the backyard, playing soccer. I was sitting on the porch, just watching them, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Chloe came over to me, breathless from running around. "Dad," she said, sitting next to me. "Do you think Mom's ever going to get better?" I didn't know how to answer that. I looked at her, and I could see the hope in her eyes. She wanted so badly for things to be different, for her mother to be the person she had once dreamed she'd be. "I don't know, sweetie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But what I do know is that you don't have to worry about it. You've got me. And I'm going to make sure you and Tom are always okay." She smiled, and I could tell that, even though the question still lingered in her mind, she was starting to understand that maybe, just maybe, things didn't need to be perfect to be okay. It was a small moment, but in that moment, I realized something. I was doing it. I was making a life for them. We were all moving forward, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. As the kids ran back to the game, I stood up, feeling the warm sun on my face. It had been a long road, but I was starting to believe that we could finally move past everything. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. Things might never be the way they were before, but that was okay. Because what I had now was better. It was real. It was mine. And I was going to keep holding on to it. For them. For me. For us. And that's how I started to heal, by focusing on the life I could create now, instead of the one that had been shattered. The months that followed were quiet, peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. The tension that used to hang over the house like a storm cloud finally started to fade. Chloe and Tom were doing well, their lives more stable than I ever thought possible. And me? I was starting to feel like I had a shot at something better too. I kept myself busy, work, family, making sure the kids had everything they needed. I wasn't perfect, but I was here. And that was what mattered. Chloe started to open up more about her feelings. She talked about missing her mom, sometimes in ways that broke my heart. It wasn't easy, especially when I knew there wasn't much I could do to fix it. But I stayed honest with her. "It's okay to miss her, Chloe. It doesn't mean you don't love me. It just means you have a big heart." Tom was the easy one. He loved having me around. He was too young to understand the full picture, but I made sure he felt safe, loved, and supported. One day, as we were cleaning up after dinner, I overheard Chloe telling Tom, "Mommy isn't coming back, but it's okay. We've got Dad, and he's all we need." I didn't let her see me tearing up. But I felt something shift inside me, a quiet, solid relief. Maybe she finally understood. We didn't need Natalie to be whole. We were already a family, even without her. A few weeks later, my phone rang. It was a call from Natalie's lawyer, asking if I'd be willing to allow her a supervised visit with the kids. She was still in therapy, still trying to make progress. I took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to say yes, to give her one last chance for closure, but I knew better. I'd learned my lesson the hard way. I didn't owe her anything. I owed it to Chloe and Tom to keep them safe from the chaos she would always bring. I politely declined. And with that, I felt like I could finally breathe a little easier. We were moving forward, without her. Things were far from perfect, but they were ours. Stable. Safe. Whole. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch with a drink in hand, watching the sunset. I thought about everything, the years of pain, the betrayal, the loss. But I also thought about how far we had come. About how strong my kids were, and how I had become the father they needed. I didn't need to look back anymore. I had everything I needed right in front of me. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. As the months passed, I noticed something shifting in myself. I wasn't just getting by anymore, I was truly starting to live again. It was like I'd been treading water for years, just keeping my head above the surface, but now, I was finally able to swim. There was a quiet confidence in knowing that I had done the right thing for my kids, for my family. We were no longer trapped in the chaos that Natalie had left behind. Chloe and Tom continued to grow. Chloe became more independent, a bit more reflective. She'd started to open up to me about things that bothered her, like the kids at school asking questions about her mom. I always did my best to listen, to reassure her, and let her know that she wasn't alone. Tom, on the other hand, was still the ball of energy he'd always been. Full of life, full of laughter. But I could tell he was also learning to sense when things weren't right. A couple of times, he'd ask if we were going to see Mommy again, and I'd just tell him, "Not right now, buddy." He seemed to accept it, though I always made sure he knew he was loved. Then one afternoon, I had a conversation with a friend from work. It started off as a casual chat, but as the conversation turned to relationships, I found myself talking about Natalie, about how things had ended, how I'd been so focused on trying to fix something that was beyond repair. I realized in that moment, I had finally let go. Not just of Natalie, but of the bitterness and anger I had carried for so long. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I wasn't defined by what she had done to me. I had built something new. And while it wasn't perfect, it was mine. That night, I sat down with Chloe and Tom for dinner, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of the past hanging over me. We joked, we laughed, and we shared stories about our day. It wasn't anything special to anyone else, but to me, it felt like everything I had been working toward, this small, everyday moment of peace. As I tucked them in that night, Chloe asked, "Dad, do you think things will ever go back to normal?" I kissed her on the forehead and smiled. "Maybe not. But we've got something better now, don't we?" She smiled back, and I could see the trust in her eyes. I had done what I promised. I had given them a home. A real home. For the first time in a long time, I was at peace with everything. Life wasn't perfect, but it was enough. It was ours. And as I sat back down on the porch later that night, watching the stars, I knew one thing for sure, I was finally free. It's funny how life can change without you even realizing it, how you can go from surviving to actually living. I never thought I'd get here, but somehow here I am, feeling something like happiness again. Not the kind I had before, not the kind that came with Natalie and the promise of an easy, picture-perfect family, but a deeper kind of peace. The kind that comes from making it through the worst and still coming out the other side, holding the pieces together. One Saturday, a few months after the court battle, I took Chloe and Tom to the park. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and they were running around, laughing like there was nothing in the world to worry about. Watching them, I couldn't help but feel proud. They had been through more than any kid should ever have to deal with, and yet here they were, thriving. They had resilience, strength. They had me. I had finally stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped worrying about what might be coming next. I was letting myself be present, in the moment. While they played, I sat on a bench, my mind wandering. I thought about the last few years, how badly I had tried to fix something that was never meant to be fixed. How hard I fought to make it work with Natalie, only to realize that the best thing I could do for Chloe and Tom was to let go of that hope. There was nothing left for me in the past. A couple of families walked by, the kind that looked like they had it all together, mom, dad, kids laughing in the sun. A pang of something flickered in my chest, but it wasn't sadness. It was a quiet understanding. I'd once wanted that picture of a perfect family, but now I saw that my family was just as real, just as good. It was different, sure, but it was mine. And I was done trying to fit it into some other mold. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, I was sitting on the couch, flicking through channels. A part of me wanted to just zone out, but another part of me wanted to keep thinking, keep reflecting. I turned off the TV and let the silence settle around me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe without looking over my shoulder. Natalie was gone, her presence no longer lurking in the background, making me second-guess everything I did. The constant tension I'd lived with for so many years was gone, replaced by something I'd never thought I'd find again: freedom. Maybe one day, I'd be ready to open up to someone else. But for now, it was just me and the kids. And that was enough. I had everything I needed. I stood up, stretched, and walked to the kitchen. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to feel heavy, but now felt like peace. The kids were healthy, happy, and growing. And I was becoming the man I'd always wanted to be, the father I had promised myself I'd be. I poured myself a drink and walked to the window. The stars were out, the night calm. Life, for once, felt simple again. I wasn't sure what the future held. But for the first time, I was okay with that. And that was the moment I knew everything was going to be all right. As the months passed, things continued to settle into a rhythm I never thought I'd have. Chloe and Tom were doing well, better than I'd ever hoped. There were still moments when they missed Natalie, especially Chloe, but she'd grown stronger, more independent. I could see the quiet strength in her, and I was proud of how she'd handled everything. For me, life became more about now. It wasn't about the past anymore, or worrying about what was coming next. It was about being here, being present for the kids, and building something real with them. One evening after dinner, Chloe sat down next to me and said, "Dad, I think I'm okay with everything now." I looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Mom's not here, but we're okay. We've got you. And that's enough." It hit me then. We were okay. Maybe not perfect, but enough. We'd made it through the worst, and we were stronger for it. That night, I tucked them in, kissed them goodnight, and sat in the living room for a while, reflecting. Things weren't perfect, but they never had to be. What we had now was real. It was ours. And I was finally, truly at peace. For the first time in years, I felt like I could rest. Life wasn't easy, but it was good. And that was enough for me.